if you're on my team, you have my trust. People find this contrarian. I don't. For me, this is like, how else? Like, I'm not never going to take a bet against a person on my own team, whether that is somebody in sales, whether that is somebody in support, whether that is the receptionist. Does not matter. If you are a part of my team, if you're part of my company, you have my trust. You can do silly things to unearn that trust, which is, most people are not stupid to do that. But this whole thing that you have to earn my trust, it just delays good outcomes. And the reason you're hiring somebody, you got to empower, you got to put your shoulder behind them. This is really important.
Welcome to Brick by Brick, where we learn how successful startups were really built directly from the people who built them. My name is Arpan Panyani, co-founder of Garuda Ventures. Today, our guest is Raj Chopra. Raj is a deep domain expert who's currently SVP of Security Products at Cisco. He's had a long career in startups and tech across cybersecurity and networking, and was one of the very first employees at Netskope, which is now a decacorn in the cybersecurity realm. In our chat, we cover his journey across multiple platform shifts like cloud and AI, how external forces beyond your control can catalyze your market, and his advice for success in startups and tech. Enjoy. Hi, Raj. How are you?
I am very well, Arpan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for taking some time. How are things? We are approaching the holidays, and we're just talking before the camera kicked on about how we're hoping to both get a little downtime it's always frenetic year end in life, and particularly in enterprise software. So are you hopefully going to get a little time away?
Always, and hope rings true. But we have, like you said, a pretty frenetic build up to the end of the year.
Yeah,
Always a quarter to finish, always the last
sure.
minute rush. So we will
Yeah.
not miss that excitement either.
Okay. Well, look, I do appreciate you taking time. I've mentioned this at the top before we got on, but we're about 12 episodes into this podcast. Of course, my partner Rishi and I are building Garuda Ventures, a pre-seed focused B2B centric venture fund, first check investors into founders just getting started at the Deck and a Dream stage. We both have been operators for a long time, and we built these great networks, having built companies and help build companies of just great executors, operators, and part of the value add we hope brick by brick our podcast brings to the ecosystem is lessons learned
Yeah.
from people who have done it, and you have done it, sir. So I'm really excited to get some of your time. So thanks.
Thank you very much. And I will say that we have been the beneficiaries of that good work that you've done industry wide. It's not just about company, but I remember the work that you've done earlier. We, as an industry, have been beneficiaries of the work that you guys put in. So uh,
Yeah.
grateful for that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just on that point. It's funny because when I came to the West Coast and startup land, it was about 2013. It wasn't, it was early in my journey, but startups have been around for a long time. But at the time, there was a transition kind of going on of like how much the startup journey was knowledge was being shared. Paul
Yeah,
Graham and YC and all of this, and now it's great. It's just there's so much information to on the investing side and certainly on the startup and company building side, and
right.
hopefully we're going to add that to the pantheon of these things. So
Let's get to it.
why don't we
Yeah,
hop in, Raj? And again, thanks for the time. And so I'll just start with how we met initially, and then I'd love to talk about a few things. Obviously, your background, your journey in enterprise software, and particularly
sure.
networking and security, in particular, your time at Netskope, a really important cloud security kind of business, and then some of the advice you may have for folks along the journey. You've seen kind of early stage, growth stage, public company. We'll just cover all that ground. So
Sure.
we met actually in 2014, I think it was. I was a newbie at Okta. We were just building our partner ecosystem up, and particularly outside of the sort of application ecosystem into the sort of adjacent cyber products, and particularly this then emerging category, cloud access security brokers, CASB, which we'll
Yeah.
get into later. You and I kind of had a connection right away. I had a lot of fun getting to meet the early Netscope people, and I was making it up. I didn't know a ton about this world. I had a law finance background, and just wanted to do good work for Freddie and Todd and the team I was working on. And so it was fun to meet you then. And I've obviously watched your journey, and we've stayed close over the years, and glad to reconnect here. But why don't you start off just your own background, where you're from, and then of course how did you kind of make your way out to how and why did you make your way out to Silicon Valley?
Yeah. Born and raised in India, did my undergrad in India, fun times. And like most of us, at least most of folks like me, US has always been the place to come to. This is where a lot of creation happens, a lot of excitement. Um, and at least from a distance, everything looked amazing about the US. And so the usual way to come is through a master's. And I had my journey through the same thing, and UC Berkeley, etc. So that is how I came. We came to the West Coast. We came to the Bay Area, and my wife and I have been here ever since. So very standard in the sense of coming to a place where we knew there were bigger, better
Yeah,
things to go and do.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And then I'm presuming you were trained in kind of as an engineering sort of student. I don't know, was that your training or was it something else?
Yeah, yeah. No, that was exactly right. So I am a computer science undergrad by training. And back in the day when I was going to undergrad school, it was my dad's advice, believe it or not, because it was everything was about geeks and electronics back in the day. And he was like, this thing called computers is going to be. I have a sneaky feeling it's going to be important. Why don't you go do that? And I was mad at him for even because he had his way of persuading by saying, here
Yeah,
are all the points, but then it's your decision to make. And I was like, great, it's
yeah,
one of those
yeah,
things.
yeah. That's funny.
But now I
Yeah,
look upon it and have a whole well of gratitude
yeah,
for
yeah,
the
yeah.
path that he put me on.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. I was interested to maybe just moving a little bit forward in your journey
sure.
that you went to the product management, product marketing kind of route early on. I don't know if there was a time as you were sort of an engineer directly, or you kind of went directly into product.
Yeah,
But I'm curious about that choice early on, and then
yeah,
maybe you can then also respond to this point of, what is like if you just step back in enterprise software, what is the sort of relationship between product management, product marketing? They're sort of interlinked in enterprise software companies, and you've kind of obviously you've straddled both. So if you
right, right.
can give us thoughts on
So,
those.
funnily enough, I went from being in engineering to and went into strategy. And in Juniper, we used to call it corp dev,
Yep.
which you are very well aware of.
Yeah.
And I still remember. I'll leave the names out to spare the innocent here. But one of the acquisitions that we were chasing, we lost to a competitor by a very small amount of money. And yes, we were all collectively like, I cannot believe this, etc., etc. The gentleman who was running security product management at Juniper back then, he was like, wait, Rod, so you were in engineering and you went directly into strategy, and now we're talking about if our investment thesis was right, then our build thesis would also be correct because nothing really has changed, just that this asset is not available. So, what do you think about coming and actually building what you were thinking about helping us acquire? And I was like, David, do you do you really? And he was like, yes, absolutely. So that was my start into product management. It wasn't uh, sort of, I guess, traditional. And I loved it because it had a lot of different things that needed to be taken care of. It wasn't just sort of the product definition, etc., but all of the different aspects. It gave a little bit more sense of impact and control, and that is the thing that was attractive to me. I will be the first one to say I was not your 10%, 1% engineer. I was a good engineer, not a great
Yeah.
engineer.
Yeah.
So the choice
Yeah.
was relatively easy for me to make.
Yeah. No, isn't that funny, right? I recall Ben Horowitz even saying that one day when he was looking over the shoulder of some people at Netscape, and he said that that guy could read hex or binary, know exactly where he's like, well, now I know I'm never going to be a 1% engineer
Yeah.
because that guy can
Yes.
do that. It's obviously his
Yes.
product or
Yes.
something. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then just on the point of like product management, product marketing, when I joined Okta, again, I was a bit of a novice in enterprise software, and they're sort of
Yeah.
interleaved. How do those two functions operate well together, and when they're working well
Yeah.
together?
I I think I have, by the way, amazing product marketing. I've been fortunate to have amazing product marketing stakeholders and counterparts. They've been amazing. We'll talk about Netskope. I mean, that team was just so fantastic. We are finishing each other's sentences. So, what I would say is the why of what we are building is really where you have to genuinely understand the details, sweat them, really get into the specifics, and not just observe what is happening around you, what a competitor may be doing, et cetera, et cetera. So PMship is one of those things where you cannot get too complacent about, oh, I know this. This is what worked earlier, so it must work now, because there is no such thing as pattern matching for the most part for a successful product. You have to think about the problem that is in front of you as a unique problem rather than going pattern seeking.
Yeah.
Product marketing, in my opinion, is an amazing function that helps you articulate that why in the language that a person wants to hear, right? Which is a very, very crucial component, in my opinion. And I learned this both the hard way and then enjoyed when done the right way.
I see.
It is definitely a skill. It is a craft. It is not
Yep.
something about better penmanship and so on and so forth. But it is truly like defining the personality of the product as the market consumes and observes it. So I think the why and how it gets sort of how it gets message not message but how it gets perceived by the right sort of stakeholders, marketing and PM, um, go hand in hand.
Yeah, and makes a lot of sense. I don't think I've heard it articulated that way before, which is cool. And I think that probably goes to the point of why they need to be hand in glove, because you can't really, that message or have the customer perceive the way you want to unless you actually understand the product very deeply, and particularly for technical products.
Absolutely, and I'm a big believer in UX, PM, and PMM, the three of them working together, because the personality of the product, the personality of how it is talked about on the website, in literature, um,
Yeah.
in technical docs, how people interact, the whole persona needs to be aligned and unified. So I think UX, you didn't mention that, but that's a very key component of everything.
Yep.
UX, product, and product marketing,
Product marketing.
um,
Yeah.
very, very intertwined.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the early journey. Let's say pre Netscope, post Netscope, when we intersected.
Sure,
But
sure,
before
sure, sure.
our intersection, you had spent time at Juniper on the product side after corp dev and strategy. Then it was, I guess, a prior run at Cisco. So just as
Yep.
between the two, what was happening in the industry at the time? Why was it an interesting and dynamic market? What was happening in the industry? What was happening that made it a compelling kind of 05 to 2012 period? This was pre-cloud, basically. Maybe it
Pre-cloud.
was just the
Yep,
birth of
yep.
cloud. Yeah. So I'd just love
Yeah.
to hear, what was interesting about that time.
Sure, sure. Um, so during the time, by the way, my way to Juniper was through an acquisition of a company called NetScreen.
Yep. Yep.
NetScreen was uh, it was weird, but that was one of those companies that went public. It was the only company that went public during that crazy time of 2000, 2001, when everything was crashing and burning.
Yeah.
There was a one company that went public. Great fit in the market, very, very good, very aligned go to market, etc. But I'll fast forward Juniper. So
Yep.
Juniper, up until then, this is 2003, 2004, when
Hmm.
there were huge whiplashes in the service provider market. So you could go from doing $600 million a quarter to doing $600 million for the whole year. Like very, very dramatic. The whiplash of that up and down was like crazy. The anti-SaaS, the one where we
Right.
say, "Oh, we've got a cash flow that is coming in," and
Yeah.
so on. So there's the anti that. So the strategy that Juniper took on was that for them to be a stable and durable winner in the market, they needed to enter the enterprise in a formidable way. And the path to enter the enterprise, as was deemed by Juniper's board was through security. Switching followed. The starting point was not switching. There were multiple things that were tried, but finally, what was decided was that security was the way that they were going to enter into the enterprise market.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, once the acquisition was complete, there were obviously more capabilities that needed to be built out, a better IPS, something more on user identity. Wi-Fi was just coming into its own. And so enterprise unto itself was expecting a lot more from the security portfolio. And then the other thing that had happened is that this little thing called iPhone was coming out. And suddenly all of us had a browser in our pocket. And the
Right.
way these things worked back then was you could sort of just move the map a little bit on your browser, and it would stir up like 40 TCP connections. These are the non-optimized sort of WAP was one of the protocols, etc. If you maybe some people will remember. So suddenly there was a huge need for firewalls that were doing NAT6.4, lots of session counts that needed to be set on for the service providers on the GI/GN interface in the cloud. So those were the two big sort of events, seminal events, one organic, one inorganic that was outside in happening to us. And that was the genesis of taking what was the firewall, which was NetScreen's primary product, and then into Juniper, to then saying, how do we turbocharge this? That's where the SRX product line came out, which was not just like an order, like it wasn't a little bit better, like a 20% better, 50% better. It was a couple of orders of magnitude better in those areas: session count, number of new sessions per second, etc. And it was amazing because Juniper back then was very much known for, if it is going to be fast and at scale, there was nobody better in the game than Juniper, and we lived that entire spirit and legacy to its fullest. So that's what was happening. And on the enterprise side, we were expanding some of the focus. And I'll tell you, that's where sort of the initial germ of what became CASB also started. If you're interested, I'm going to tell you that story.
Yeah, it's a good segue. Maybe one more on this era from NetScreen to Juniper to Cisco would be kind of, what was the pace? Was it sort of, you were building these, obviously I'm leading the witness a little, but these were fast growing markets. They weren't sort of run rate, steady state markets. And so what was that feeling like, that you were being pushed by the market was pulling product out of you, that startup feel, but at a sort of bigger company, that the new business line was scaling dramatically?
100%. So even back then, AT&T and Verizon were chasing each other. AT&T had won the exclusive right for iPhone, if you remember. And they had to build out. So it wasn't optional. AT&T was selling, people were coming onto the AT&T network, and if they had a bad experience, like, it would be just generally, without going into details, it would be very bad for that company, which had probably invested billions of dollars to get that exclusivity. So the need in the market was stark. I would say the need was with deadlines. It wasn't just like, one day we will. It was like, by this day, we must have this in place, and we are willing to give you X, Y, Z.
Sure.
So on the demand side, I'll again just not go into specific numbers, but this was the first product in Juniper's history that went from 0 to 300 million in a space of 12 months. And we could have done more had we been able to ship more. And AT&T was the one customer that was sort of not quite in Juniper's camp. It was sort of not with Juniper, if you will, for the most part. And they were, once we had launched this capability and made it available and successful in their deployments, AT&T was one of the most important customers within Juniper. So that transition in the market drove a lot of adoption right away, and the quality, the scale, the abilities really mattered.
Yeah, the parallels to NVIDIA and the current GPU boom are quite obvious. I think the way you describe it, there's an exogenous force.
Yeah,
GPT-3 comes out, and everyone and ChatGPT comes out, and then the demand for NVIDIA specific chips goes through the roof, well beyond what anyone would have thought. And so, and it's
absolutely.
also because it's sort of an infrastructure kind of compute layer, and it's kind of a must have. So it's kind of analogous to maybe 15 years prior.
Very
The
much
build
so.
out kind of needed. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, very much so. In fact, the reason NVIDIA's or ChatGPT's adoption has increased is, if you think about it, people had, I mean, iPhones or phones in general were not cheap, right? Especially these so-called smartphones were not cheap. So somebody had to invest three, four, five, I don't even remember now, but they had to invest like a pretty decent amount of money. And on top of that, have a whatever the connection used to cost back then, whether it was $30 or $50, I don't remember. So it wasn't like exactly like you just turn around and you can see the magic of an iPhone and all that kind of stuff. Now, literally all of us have an iPhone or have a phone, a smartphone. All of us have an internet connection. The cost to trying out ChatGPT is exactly zero, right? So there is literally nothing that is standing between between your curiosity and an outcome. I mean, talk about impulsive use. So it is phenomenal to see the kind of adoption that ChatGPT had on like the rocket ship, because literally there is no or very little friction, no to none to zero.
yeah, yeah. I'd love to talk about Netscope for a bit. This was kind of a really an important it is and your journey there was super early.
Yeah,
And I think particularly relevant to the folks who often listen to our podcast is those pre-Series A builders, right? You joined
yeah.
super early. So let's talk about a few things. Like maybe one, when did you join? How did you join? Why did you hear about this company? Maybe two,
Yeah,
what is it today? What was it then? And how did it go from what it was then to what it is today? I know you helped really
yeah.
build the products and then have moved on while the company continues to
Right,
grow. And then I'd love to talk
right.
about kind of where it fits in the landscape of sort of security products today.
Of course. Uh, so Netscope, as you can imagine, is very, very close to my heart. Why did I join? It was a no-brainer. I mean, this was Sanjay, who I've worked with and known for a long period of time.
Got it.
I'll give you the example as to how we sort of kind of even came to that same conclusion. So Sanjay was responsible back then for SSL VPN, amongst other things, SSL VPN at Juniper. And I remember they built a like a nice shiny 2RU box that was all the fancy capacity, this, that, and the other. And they'd go to customers and they would say, "Hey, this is amazing. This is awesome. Uh, but what do you want me to SSL VPN to? Because my Salesforce instance is now out, my email is not in the environment. Progressively, there was this thing called Box and Dropbox and all of those things, like they are moving up. What do you want me to SSL VPN to?" And so Sanjay, being the thinking person that he is, was like, interesting. I, on the other hand, back then was at Cisco, and we just launched this thing called vSwitch, and done some firewall, blah blah blah, the usual sort of stuff. And I would go to customers and they would say, "Hey Raj, next time you come, your firewall better be virtual, it better be cheap, and it better be cloud, because I'm not building any more data centers. So whatever you're doing, it's great, but this is the last iteration of whatever you're going to do." And so the two of us were coming, looking at this from different lenses, and Sanjay had a much more thought out plan. He had lots of good engagement with Lightspeed. I had gone and met a few VCs, but at that point in time, those are the guys who were like, "Hey, you should be talking to each other. You are friends." Um, and from there on, it was very, very quick for us. Like, this is a no-brainer. Um, in fact, my first job was to actually convince Krishna, who's one of the co-founders at Netscope, for Krishna to join Netscope,
Got it.
versus the other thing that he was dabbling with, he was thinking about. And I was like, "This is a no-brainer, man. Don't you want to work with us?" And he was like, "Yes, I guess."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was
so
it
it
a
was
no-brainer?
very natural.
Yeah, it sounds like no-brainer. It's interesting you use that term because, it's entrepreneurs, co-founders, early employees often think no-brainer because I love working with this person. I know them and I will go through wherever they go, I'm going. Or it could be like the market needs this. We actually know it needs it now. Like everything is going to work. It's just a matter of building it. And it sounds like it was a bit
Right.
of both in your
It,
case.
it, it was so individually we had this conviction already. Like we were getting told by people who were literally paying us money, giving Sanjay money, giving me money. I mean, our company's money, I should say. But they were spending on our products, but telling that this is an unmistakable trend. Applications are going to the cloud, and I am not. Whatever you guys are talking about right now is going to be not needed. So then, obviously, as a product person, like, okay, so what replaces? What is this new world that we are stepping into? So that conviction, not so articulate, but that conviction was bubbling, right? I can talk for myself. That I knew that there was a change that was happening, and the change would, broadly speaking, take this sort of form and idea. But it wasn't like there was working code, and that was not the idea. But it was unmistakable that this was a SaaS first world. And in that SaaS first world, how are we going to make sure that IT that is responsible for their users and their data, two important things, that is not changing. The way applications are being deployed, etc., is changing. The way the users are accessing is changing, but their remit, their the outcomes they're responsible for, securing the users and the data, is not going to change. So we knew the market was there, and then of course come the people, and it was like I would work with these people any given day, any given point in time. Um,
Yeah.
in fact, yeah. So I worked for Sanjay when I was at Juniper. I was part of the team that recruited Krishna into Juniper.
Hmm.
We all knew each other. Ravi was known to all of us really well. So we all knew each other and had a lot of mutual respect for the work that we
Yeah.
do. Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe two quick reactions to the first piece of what you said, as opposed to equally, as not more important, this sort of star team that you all kind of knew each other. But on that first thing, what was interesting to me with what you described it just now was two things. One was, um, we as seed stage investors are always trying to find really amazing companies, even in the even let's say within a given platform ecosystem. But when a shift is happening, it's very dramatic. In fact, Todd McKinnon, CEO and founder of Okta, he actually just did a podcast, Logan Bartlett's podcast from Redpoint.
yeah,
He talked about this as well. That actually the exact as we know, a cloud identity and cloud access security brokers, that market were peas and carrots, and so
yeah,
he was referring to how he had that same sentiment. Something is changing. I have to build something for it. And when shifts are happening, are actually and just like right now with AI in many ways, um, really dramatically big opportunities rather than sort of merely pretty big companies can get built. And that's obviously what happened with Netskope and Okta and
yeah.
others at that time.
Um,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. I think you hit the nail on the head, with
Yeah.
sort of bringing that together. It was unmistakable that the market pulled us. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were making no mistakes. Of course, we were making mistakes
Yeah.
along the way,
Yeah.
but the
Well, yeah,
but the
this is
need in
this
the
is the
market was amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I think Sequoia's often credited with this sort of worldview, but you can make a lot of mistakes. If the market's pulling you forward, you're going to find a way to be
yeah,
successful. If there's a headwind in your face, it's like no matter how
yeah.
good the team. That's one perspective.
Yeah,
The
I
other
would
thing that you
I
had
would
said
say
that
Netscope was exhibit A for,
yeah,
yes, we made some mistakes along the way, but boy, it
yeah,
didn't
but
matter.
the market
We
keeps pulling you forward. Yeah.
as long as we adapted and market was pulling forward, it was great.
Yeah, and then the other thing you said was interesting was when you sort of said in the context of this dynamic platform shift was that what won't change. Jeff
Yeah,
Bezos' kind of phrase, like think about what won't change as opposed to what
yeah,
will. And I think you just said, look, despite the shifts that are happening, here's what IT and security teams still are responsible for, and that's
absolutely.
going to be sort of a constant while this thing is changing down here. So
Yeah,
makes sense.
yep,
Um,
yeah,
maybe one more on the Netscope side of your journey, right? Because this was a very tiny startup, day zero. you built the products team and the product for 4 or 5 years. Sanjay, who you alluded to, we think about this a lot, particularly as first check seed pre-seed investors, is underwriting this person, this team. Why are they special? We have our own language for it. Everyone does, but it's critical for us in what we do to find people who will run through walls. People who I met with Mamoon Hamid at the time at
Yep.
another fund, and he had said he's a silent killer, right? Like, just who
Yep.
are these talents, these sort of generational talents, if you can find them? And so, just maybe a minute on why you felt that way. You sort of discussed it already, but what was it about Sanjay as opposed to maybe another CEO
Yeah.
founder who maybe had the same opportunity?
Yeah. First of all, I've known Sanjay. I told you, right? I mean, I worked for him for a short period of time, but you get to know each other really well. I think for me, the important part uh, with Sanjay is consistency, because I will tell you, I saw this earlier on in a startup world. Of course, I mean, as we call it, the optimism sandwich. Before anybody believes it, you have to be so darn convinced that this is going to be the most important thing that nothing can sway you. I cannot count the number of people who would tell me, like, this is a stupid idea, there's going to be a feature on a firewall, there's going to be no. I was like, okay, great, thank you very much. The pizza was nice, so I'll meet you again. Um, all that is good, but the thing with Sanjay has been consistency and sort of that steadfastness. We would have the highest highs and the lowest lows within a 24-hour period, and Sanjay would be like, you know what? Let's just, what's the next thing we're doing? What's the next thing we're doing? In fact, I had to go and tell him, like, hey, you got to show up as the CEO. You got to show up as a little bit of vulnerability. You got to acknowledge that there was something, we stubbed our toe, and we're going to fix it, and we're going to move on. Like, because people want a little bit of that vulnerability from him. But he's one of those people who is just so consistent that you never, ever, ever have to worry about, can I trust what he's saying? Do we make this decision? Can we undo this decision? No. All of those iffiness that gets in the way of making quick decisions, effective decisions, goes away, because you know he's going to be very consistent. That's the thing that helped us. It was foundational, right? That helped us. Like, you know what? I need 4 more engineers to go expand this thing. I need to go talk to Sanjay, and it's going to be a 30-minute conversation, and we're going to get going. So that consistency has, in my mind, been the hallmark of why good decisions get made durably and can build on each other, and compound over a period of time to create that differentiation.
Yeah.
Very much close to what your podcast is, brick by brick, because
Yeah.
a decision made, a quick decision, another decision,
Yeah.
and that's how you build up this moat.
Yeah. There aren't a lot of shortcuts, right? It's just
Yep,
execution, quick decision making,
that's
make changes if
exactly
you
right.
need to.
That's exactly
Freddie had
right.
a phrase, others have it too, which is, and disagree and commit. You're going to disagree on
Yep,
things, fine. We're going to do it one way
yep.
and go. I want to get one more Netscope
Sure,
conversation
sure, sure,
topic
sure.
out of you, and then I'd love to talk about your current mandate, significant kind of role that you have at
Hmm.
Cisco. On Netscope, one more, which is, the Gartnerization category world
Yep,
of when it was born was this CASB category.
yep.
Fast forward a decade later, it's this other thing, secure access service edge, SASE. How does a company in other markets or in cyber in particular, basically evolve its own category? That's pretty rare, right? So what happened there, and was that kind of a rare thing? I mean, it seems like an incredible transition to change the
Yeah,
category you're in, or was it more that the products stayed the same, but the positioning or the branding or the market's terminology of what it was doing
yeah,
changed? Which was it?
yeah. So it was definitely a genuine evolution, but I will say it was an evolution. It wasn't like, you can't finagle a whole market. You can't do that. It is a natural sort of transition that happens. So I'll tell you, when we started with CASB, our focus at Netscope was, we are going to make policy decisions. We are the policy enforcement company. And every now and then, I'd go in front of a customer. Sanjay would go in front of a customer, and we would have this Copernicus moment. What do you mean cloud? Like, we don't use cloud. What are you talking about? And it was like, dude, do you use Office 365? Yeah, but that's different. Do you use Salesforce? Yeah, but that's different. Do you use da, da, da? I was like, what? That is cloud, and your data is going there. Your users are accessing, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So we started from policy enforcement, and then we had to actually take a tiny step back and say, let me show you the use of the application. Okta actually came up with, what was that report, Arpan, that you guys produced? State of,
Businesses at work.
yeah,
Businesses at work, I think is the report
businesses
they
at
call it.
work, right?
Yeah.
And we were contributing, we were learning, like it was a
Yeah.
osmosis back and forth about data, and that would fill that report up, and it was amazing. Now the next step came, okay, so these are applications that people are using that happen to be cloud native, SaaS, if you will. But these same users from the same devices also use this inventory application that I built 10 years ago.
Right.
What do I do for that? Oh, for that you have to be on a VPN. Wait, what? Now I have to install that. Then it was like, well, there are all these other problems with VPNs because I have to expose the whole network, and these are internet facing. Um, um, when these things started to come together, what are the other things that these users are also doing? They are going to the internet, because if you get a link to, I'm just going to make something up. If you get a link to Dropbox, but you don't own Dropbox instance in your company, are you going to the internet or are you going to SaaS?
Hmm.
Right. When you look at the practicality of it, it starts to all blend together.
I see.
And so, from our perspective, as we were building the product, it was a very natural migration for us to go from SaaS to also include internet. The private application was more work, and that has been the evolution. And then when COVID happened, that's when all of the assumptions around traffic patterns and this and that just completely changed. What used to be 10% became the 90%. I would say it became the 100%, which is people accessing from not offices. Um, and so suddenly all your assumptions about how these things are set up was gone out of the window. And that was right in the middle of the architecture that we had developed in Netskope. So
Yeah.
it's a very natural
Natural evolution. Right.
aggregation of all of these little bits and bobs
Yeah.
along the way that has gone from
Yeah.
CASB to internet access to private applications to VPN replacement to now even some of the networking stuff. So and hence SASE. So natural
Yeah.
evolution is what I
Makes
would
sense.
call it.
Yeah, and then one another way to think about that story,
Mm.
completely independent of networking and security, is the sort of more archetypal startup journey of from sort of product to platform or feature to product to platform. You could think of the CASB use case maybe as like just that sort of SaaS, but as you find VPN replace and internet access and prem, that product has become a product suite and becomes a
Mm-hmm.
platform, and
Mm-hmm.
that gets you from like a nice product tuck in by lemonade to potentially a generational kind of business, and that's a thing as investors we love to see if you're lucky to be a
Yep.
part of those kind of stories. So
Yep. Yep. Yep.
awesome. Let's keep going. Thanks for a little trip on memory lane, but I want to talk about kind of your mandate today.
Yeah.
What are you doing now? What is your title? And then let's talk a bit about what's top of mind for you and your team right now. So let's start with kind of what's your title? What is the org today at Cisco?
Yeah.
And we'll go from
Okay. So so at Cisco, the title is Chief Product Officer for all of the security products, Senior Vice President. And the charter is really how do we transform Cisco as a company through security. So security is something that has been put again at a board level mandate in what is called zone uh, in that model from Jeffrey Moore about zone to win. Security is in the transformation zone, and that means that we have the heft of a Fortune 100 company sort of putting their shoulder behind resources and dollars to make sure that we can take a product line in a growing market and make it stellar. Um, and that has been the focus for the 9 quarters that I've been here, which is organic development, a huge pride in product excellence, because this is not just acquiring and stapling companies together. That is not the intention. Um, but good people make good products make good companies. So we have been acquiring talent along the way, much more than technology. Um, and and the mandate, the charter is all things security as it pertains to, again, users, applications, and any breach protection that happens, building that and making sure that it is deeply, deeply aligned with the network. Primary reason for that is that in a world where everything is encrypted, you need to have context. You can't suddenly keep inspecting in between in a world where everything is encrypted. So having a footprint on the endpoint, having a footprint of where your applications are truly the way that we can scale and hence or be effective. And then by doing it in the network, that's the important way. That's one of the important ways to scale.
Yeah.
That is sort of the large at the highest level.
Right.
That's the big mandate.
Yeah, and maybe just to tee off one thing you said there, I mean, the security product landscape, it's sprawl. There's so many companies, there's so many categories. It sounds like, if I'm hearing it right, that the way you think about it at Cisco is in the context of that sprawl. Where are we sort of? What's our right to win? Well, we're the networking layer. We're switching. We're routing. Um, Sort of, we're the backbone of the internet, and so things that sort of synergize, if you will, with security products that synergize with that sort of critical layer you play are the kind of security products that you're likely to go build slash buy.
Right. And we are building abstractions on top of it. So network is a way for us to scale, not so much sort of network as a way for us to embed, but network as a way for us to scale. I'll give you some examples. Like a lot of the decisions that get made today in access, you could buy yourself a pair of shoes and somebody is going to ask for a username, password, given sort of your background, right? And so how is it is no longer just about using identity for access control. That's a given, right? That happens all the time. It is also the most abused vector out there. I was told credentials, this, that, and the other. So securing the use of identity to give access is become a really important thing. I'm giving you a small example. That is nothing per se to do with networking and switching and so on and so forth. But that networking switching is where that enforcement happens at scale.
Yeah, right,
Right.
right.
So
It's
the
the ultimate enforcement
enforcement being
layer.
scaling. Yeah, exactly. But the idea is to absolutely talk in the abstraction that the applications and users interacted. No, we cannot say users are using ChatGPT, and let me tell you what IP address can block what IP address. It's going to be useless, right? So if a user is using ChatGPT, your constructs of both visibility as well as policy enforcement need to be in the same vernacular. This user, that application, these primitives, this data, etc., etc. But the way to enforce it at scale is using network as that
Got
substrate.
it. Makes
Yeah.
sense. And it's interesting you mentioned kind of 9 quarters, kind of right around your, ascension or joining Cisco at this role was around roughly the ChatGPT moment. And so interesting to think about how did or how has the AI, Gen AI specifically, wave kind of disrupted, changed, caused the within the lens of security BU at Cisco to say, well, things are changing faster. The whole landscape is changing. We're going to reorganize our priorities. For example, AI
Yeah.
security for AI, or AI powered security, or AI
Yeah.
as an enabling
Yeah.
layer across all these products. So how are you guys thinking about AI in the context of the security BU?
Yeah. Um, so we are thinking about thinking and putting into action AI in all possible ways.
Yeah.
And that means using AI, and it's not just strictly a security thing, but using AI for a lot of benefits. I'll give you some examples. And then the other part, which is also becoming very, very clear, is securing the use of AI. Not so that you can stop AI, but where you can enable more use and safe use of AI. So in the first bucket, um, again, just looking at what are the problems to solve, not really sort of chasing data sheets and somebody does this and we do this and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So if you look at an average person who is in the SOC, when something goes wrong, the first thing everybody wants to know is who made the change and what was the change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then people are looking for context, like when was the last time this user logged in? What was the failed event? What are the applications they typically access? No, 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 no. And what ends up happening is if you just follow that thread, there are 16, 17, 20 things that people do all the time, most of the time. It is perfect for these days the right term to use is an agentic workflow, but just think of it as a workflow where we can bring that richness of the context right there and then, so that this analyst who has a very demanding job, um, he or she has the richness of the context available to them right away instead of
Right.
sort of
Hands-on
swivel
keyboard.
chairing
Yeah.
across 15 things like
Yeah.
why. The other thing is the busiest person, this person, is also the one who is getting constant knocks on the door. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Is this resolved? Is that resolved? Can you just create a sort of log, if you will, an update, if you will, of where we are in the process so people can stop sort of bugging, but not be left without information, but they can be informed without this person bugging. These are more what I would say quality of life improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are other mechanisms where we can unlock a whole set of new capabilities using AI that were not possible before. So, for example, hey, let me give Arpan access to this clean room called Thunderstorm, right? We're working on a special project. Now, some poor soul today goes in and says, okay, Arpan, 3 devices, make sure he's in the US, turn on disconnect, blah, 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 like whatever the standard is at the organization. Um, Now you can literally ask the system, give Arpan access to clean room Thunderstorm, and the system comes back and say, hey, we already have a rule for this clean room Thunderstorm. Let's add Arpan to an AD group for the next 6 weeks. Do you want me to make that change? Interesting, but why don't you create a ServiceNow ticket? Okay, I can create a ServiceNow ticket. When it gets approved, should I then push the policy? No, inform me instead. So it informs, link comes into WebEx, somebody says, yeah, approval came in, I click, and then it says I can schedule the rule change or however automated or less automated you want it. Now, this is conversational ways in which you can get to commonsensical things, but the system is telling you rather than, and you review rather than you having
Yeah.
to inform the system again and again
Right.
and keeping all that
Totally.
travel knowledge in your head.
It's incredible. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Um, and then the third part
Mm.
is these models that people are using,
Mm-hmm.
bespoke models, foundational models, however else is the use of AI. First of all, there is a lot of experimentation going on, and it's a little bit of the wild, wild west where people don't quite know. Some people do, but most people are still
Yeah.
experimenting heavily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as they start to build models that are making at least recommendations. Um, how do you know? And people are going to start acting on these, right? They're not all automated, but people are going to start acting on these recommendations. Unlike software development, where one input, here's my logic, I know this is the output that is going to come out on the other side. That is not true with AI. So based on the prompt, it could be something different. Based on the stimulation that it gets, it could be different. So how do you ensure the validity of that model, that it is providing the right kind of recommendations in various scenarios? And our research has shown, like, and this is like mind-boggling, that within 30 prompts, 90% of the models that we have seen, and we've seen quite a few, 90% of these models, we can show you the vulnerability that exists in the model within 30 prompts, right? And these are the systems that are going to be powering at least recommendations, if not automated actions. So the bar on this needs to be really high, and I think that is the need for sort of the kinds of security we need to do. Very rich area. We're all learning. We're all
Yeah.
experimenting.
Right.
But AI is a first class
For sure.
sort of construct in every which way that we're thinking about the portfolio.
It's a great way to describe it, because you described in terms of the different ways AI is getting into the enterprise, from low-hanging value to people-centric to ROI, burnout to agentic workflows, having the system do rather than you telling. And so that's sort of one vector. The other one, is borrowing from Jeff Bezos, who I think yesterday or today was speaking
Yeah,
about AI in the context of Amazon, was saying, to our prior discussion, it's a new platform shift, and it's an enabling layer. It will be everywhere in every product in some form.
correct.
It's just a matter of how, not whether. It's very
Yes,
interesting that
yes,
we're living through these times.
yes.
Uh, yeah,
And I'm holding a little bit of these things back, which are imminent, that
yeah.
I can't just
I'm
yet
not
talk
asking you to
about.
break
Right,
any
right.
news on this podcast
Yeah,
yet.
yeah. So,
Good,
but this is
good. Well,
exactly the zeitgeist these days, which is we all are excited about the possibilities, and we're all learning. It's not like everybody has or somebody has
yeah,
an
that's
oracle,
the
which
other fun thing
I will
about
tell
this,
you.
is it's forcing people to learn new things. So new old dogs learning new tricks, young folks coming up natively AI. It's interesting that everyone's getting more technical, right? Just you have to understand, just like
Yeah,
learning how cloud delivery worked 10 to 15 years ago. You're just having to learn the actual architectures, and it's fun. All right, Raj, I'm going to speed run you through the end of this. Thank you again for the
sure.
time, but I wanted to maybe zoom back out to your sort of the advice lens. You've been
Hmm.
startup, you're a board member, you're an advisor to startups. You've helped build Netskope from day zero. Just what kind of sort of unique to your experience thing, what kind of things do you find yourself advising on, let's say, or do you find yourself providing lived experience on to founders, to early stage operators, that you think would be valuable to share? Anything come to mind in that context?
Yeah. I think some of it is gonna seem uh, uh, maybe cliched at this point in time, but these are lived experiences, like you said, and
Yeah.
they certainly hold true for me. Uh, First of all, no amount of hard work ever goes to waste. In startups, I know there is an RFP that comes, it's not successful. We went this route, we went that route. I have learned this in my career that when you put in hard work, it never goes waste. There is always a use that comes about. So if you're going to do something, do it really well. Don't think about sort of this is throwaway, this is not throwaway. No detail is too detailed. Very, very. This is my personal experience on this.
Yeah.
For people who are early or mid in their career that you bring into the organization, you 100% want to hire for attitude. I don't care about the school. I don't care about the title. I don't care about the employer, past employer, etc. Because great attitude makes up for so much of the undulation that defines a startup that that is really, really, really key in my book. And the third one, and this is my personal thing, is if you're on my team, you have my trust.
Mm-hmm.
People find this contrarian. I don't. For me, this is like how else? Like I'm not never going to take a bet against a person on my own team, whether that is somebody in sales, whether that is somebody in support, whether that is the receptionist. Does not matter. If you are a part of my team, if you're part of my company, you have my trust. You can do silly things to unearn that trust, which is most people are not stupid to do that. But this whole thing that you have to earn my trust, it just delays good outcomes.
Yeah.
And the reason you're hiring somebody, you got to empower, you got to put your shoulder behind them. This is really important. Those are sorts of things that I would say. Nothing dramatic or
Awesome.
fancy, but
Yeah.
those are really important things.
I think they're always they carry more weight when they come from someone who's on the other side of it, who's lived through it, because people love tech, they love startups. Someone from a legal and a finance background like myself would get attracted to it and jump into it. And so and people are flocking to build companies, of course, every day. And so people who have lived
Yeah.
it, I think these things, so certain things are timeless about
Yeah.
startup advice, even if it may be trite. So look, Raj, unless there's anything else you would like to sort of have the floor to end with, let me
Yeah.
know. But otherwise, um, I just wanted to say thank you for taking time. Hopefully this was fun for you. I know our audience is going to learn a lot here, and keep an eye on Cisco's BU.
Yeah.
You've been a great friend and mentor to me. So thank you as well.
Yeah. So likewise, and it was great to connect. It's been a while. I think last
Yep.
time we grabbed coffee, that coffee shop is closed, believe it or not.
Okay.
So we need to find a new
Yeah.
place to catch
Yes,
up.
sir.
But hey, Arpan, it's always fun to talk to people that you gel with and respect, and you are one
Thank
of
you.
those. So thank you for the
Thank you.
time, thank you for the opportunity,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
wish you and Rishi and all of your viewers the very best.
Thanks so much, Raj. Thank you.
You
Thanks,
got it.
and talk soon. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.